So in this class, we are going to understand what is data science, what is data science is used for, what is the purpose of learning data science, and what is the difference between other roles versus data scientist role, and what kind of problems that we can solve with the help of data science. And within data science, what is machine learning, what is the purpose of using machine learning, and what do we do with the help of machine learning, and what is the difference between normal programming versus machine learning programming. Okay, what are the tools which are available to implement or to work with the data science, or either to work for a data scientist, and which tool is best in the industry, and what is the purpose of using visualization tools, and what is the scope of big data technologies, and is it really something that you should also learn big data. So let's try to understand these terms in this class. Okay, so now let's start. So wherever you see the terminologies like data science, data mining, analytics, predictive modeling, statistics, not statistics, machine learning, and everything will fall, including statistics, and everything will fall under the umbrella of data science. Everything will fall under the same umbrella. Everything will have a specific need or specific purpose of having this. So first of all, let's try to understand what is the purpose of data science. Data. It's all about data. When we were in back in 20 years or 30 years back, there are very limited number of machines used to generate the data, right? Very limited number of machines used to generate the data. Like if you go to a bank, maybe the person who enters, who captures all your data in a bank might be able to generate some data. There are some ATM machines which were introduced to people, where only ATM machines used to generate some data, which is where people used to store and capture this data for their historical references. So because we are all are getting into the world of digitalization, each and every person started accessing all these digital devices like mobile, tablet, laptop, or etc., which started each and every machine, each and every device started generating huge amounts of data, very huge amounts of data, where the organizations who wanted to explore the opportunities in terms of businesses, in terms of their business improvement, if organizations wanted to capture this data, because they can understand the mindset of people, they can understand what are the things that people are liking it. Let's say, for example, if you take one user, the one user might be going to a Chinese restaurant, and then he would have given comments like, hey, I love the Chinese food over here. Maybe next week or next month, the same person might be traveling to some other location, like maybe Delhi or Noida, wherever it is. If the Chinese restaurant can understand that, okay, this user is someone who likes Chinese food. If I can provide that information to Chinese restaurant, they can send an offer message saying that, hey, would you like to, we have a very good chef in this so and so called, in this location, would you like to come and try our Chinese food? That can help people to improve their business. That information can provide, that right information at the right time can help the people to, or any organization to improve their business. Not only that, let's say, for example, you just went to a movie and then you said like, okay, hey, I love this movie called something called Minions, for example. Minions is a kind of animated movie. I can understand, okay, so at this so and so person will also like some animated movie. So maybe if you take an example of maybe some movie ticketing app, or some people can understand that information, can read that information, they can simply go ahead and then send you an offer message saying that, hey, there is some animated movie which is coming up, would you like to give a try, would you like to watch this movie, we just opened the advanced booking. So something like that can help people to improve their business, because each and every person has started sharing their thoughts, has started sharing their knowledge about themselves using these mobile devices, or either using the social networks that we have in the current market. organizations who can capture this data, the organizations who can process this data can get benefited out of this data. So earlier it used to be like only some limited amount of data used to be captured, used to be processed, but now because of the scope or the amount of data which is getting generated has increased a lot, it has resulted in organizations to start capturing more and more amount of data to do some analytics on top of it. Yes. Is it something data scientists are the only people who are going to capture this data? No. Lot of organizations will capture this data, and the data will be used at a number of different levels. Yes, once the data is captured, it's not something that we are, as a data scientist, we are not only the people who will be using the data. Your data will have a life cycle. Your overall data will have an entire life cycle. What is that life cycle? What happens to the data when you take an organization? So let's try to understand. So your data will be captured at transaction level. Let's say I am a person who has written a banking application. Okay. So when you go to a bank, you say like, okay, hey, I want to deposit this money. You hand over the money to the cashier. I'm using this very generic example so that people can understand it very easily. Okay. It's not that this is the only thing. I'm just taking some generic examples. Let's say you simply went to a bank and then you said like, hey, I want to deposit this so and so amount in my account. So the banker will enter the data. Or else in the same way, you go to an ATM machine and then you'll say like, hey, I want to deposit this money. There are some deposit machines which will be placed, right? And whether you want to withdraw the money using your ATM card, you will just try to withdraw the money. This is what it's transaction. So that's where your data will get generated. The initial data will get generated. Or either you take some Twitter, or either you take some so and so called Facebook. You will enter some comments. You will enter some posts. You will give some posts. These are all our transactional processes where your data is getting generated. So what happens to the data? Is it something like once you're done with your transaction, is it something like we're done? The data will get immediately deleted? No, not at all. People need it for reference, for future reference. So that's where they will start capturing the data as a data warehousing system. All your transactions that you are doing, everything will be moved into data warehouses. All your older data, historical data will be moved into data warehouses because they cannot continue to capture or maintain the data in the same transaction system, which will cause a lot of cost to the organizations. They will say like, hey, we don't want to capture the data, or we don't want to store the data beyond 3 years or 5 years or maybe 6 years or so, because whatever the data that has been captured historically, that will be moved into the archival, which means, when I say archival, means data warehouses. Or even business who wanted to understand what is happening after the data is moved into warehouses on a regular basis. Most of the organizations will start moving the data on the same day whenever the data is being captured, and they will try to move the data into data warehouses immediately, because that's when people wanted to generate some near real time data. They don't want to wait until 1 month or one week. Or most of the organizations will try to capture the data as immediately as possible and move it into data warehouses as per the current industry standards. So what happens after that? Okay, you capture the data, what happens? So that's when the descriptive analytics will start in the first step. After the data is moved into the so-and-so called data warehouses, that's when the descriptive analytics will start. So which means what happened? What do we mean by descriptive analytics? Where people will try to understand what happened in the organization. Okay, today is something called so-and-so day, 28th March. Okay, what happened in 27th March? What happened in 26th March? If they wanted to understand, they will start exploring, they will start extracting some information out of it. Okay, what is the sales for today? What was the sales yesterday? So compared to yesterday, what is the sales? Is the sales has reduced or the sales has increased, or what happened actually? Is it something that do I need to consider really about it? So to understand all this data, we call this process is called as descriptive analytics. What happened? So to understand what happened, you might need some tools, simple tools. Maybe if you're in an RDBMS system, you might use some SQL. Like you will use some SQLs and then you will try to generate some reports out of it. Or either you might also build some dashboards like business intelligence, right? So ETL people, business intelligence people, and everyone will fall under this category. So all these people will be working. Business intelligence people and all those guys will be working here. Okay. He said like, okay, this is what has happened. Why did it happen? Okay, I see that the sales has went down. The sales was at least day before yesterday, maybe the sales was somewhere close to 1.2 million. But yesterday, the sales went to 0.8, which means you lost somewhere close to 30% of your sales. Why did it happen? Why did it happen? So I need to dig in detail into the data. What happened in this particular region? So is the sales has come down in this region, or is the sales has come down in this region, or is the sales is reduced because of this particular product is been not performing well, or is this happening because of some political issues? So you need to understand why did it happen. Either if the sales is also increased, okay, why the sales is increased? Is this because of I have taken a particular celebrity as a so and so called, what do we call, I have taken a particular celebrity as a host for my product. Is it because of that my sales has increased, or is it something that, okay, I have launched a new product? Is that because of that the sales has increased? And you need to understand why did it happen, whatever it is, either it's a good news or it's a bad news or whatever it is, why did it happen? So you need to go in deeper, you need to go in deeper into the data. You need to write some even more complex queries to extract those details to understand why did it happen. And if you see all the business analysts, all the statisticians, all the business analysts are the people who are going to work in this area. Why did it happen? They will be doing diagnostic analytics. They'll be doing all this diagnostic analytics to understand that. So now, if you look at all these folks, like either you do people who are doing descriptive analytics or diagnostic analytics, where all these people will have access to your historical data. Each and every person who are working in this BI, ETL, business analyst, and everybody will have access to your historical data. When I say historical data, maybe up to, for an example, today is 28th March. Maybe you can assume like, okay, up to 27th March, if you go and talk to any people in this category, anybody can give you what happened in your organization. Anyone can give you the historical data. Anyone can give you the details about historical data. But if you go and talk to or ask anybody a simple question, hey, you said 1.2 million is the sales day before yesterday, on day before yesterday. What is the sales for today? What do you think? How much sales we can get for today, or how much I'm going to get? What is the sales that I'm going to get for tomorrow, or what is the sales is going to be for next month, or for next quarter, or either for next half year? If you ask anyone, none of the people will have access to the future data. Nobody will have access to the future data. So all these people who belongs to this so and so called descriptive analytics or diagnostic analytics, who are all the BI people, business analysts, and all these things, all these people will have only access to the historical data. They can tell you what happened till now, or till the minute, or till the seconds. But none of the people will have access to the future data. Yes, there are some problems which can be solved by these people, like understanding why did it happen. Okay, the sales has increased. Okay, why the sales has increased? There are some problems that those can be solved with the help of these people, but there are some problems where the BI or any business analyst and all these people cannot solve. What are those problems? Especially by generating the data for future. I wanted to understand how much sales I'm going to get for next 1 month, or next 1 week, or next 1 quarter. None can solve that problem. I wanted to understand, hey, let's take an example of a bank. I wanted to understand, if I approve a loan to a particular person, is this person likely to become a defaulter or not? I wanted to understand. So how can you really say that, okay, this person is likely to become a defaulter? This is going to be, is it something that we are going to approve a loan to this person and we are going to wait for another 5 years or 10 years until he pays all the EMIs, and then we're going to decide, okay, is this person is going to become a defaulter or not? No, right? Enough. That is something, whether a person will become a defaulter or not will be decided in future, which means it's a future data. Is this person is likely to become a defaulter or not? Is this person is likely to become a diabetic patient or not? Which is all related to future data. If I went to a hospital or maybe some clinical test, And if someone comes and says that, hey, I wanted to understand whether is it something that I'm likely to become a diabetic patient or not. Okay, yes, you can say like you can go for a blood test. But if any one of you in general going to a hospital, maybe those who are very young, maybe less than the years of 30 years, if any one of you give a try, maybe you would have already gone through that experience where if you go to a hospital or trying to talk to have a conversation with the doctor, is it something like, do I need to test for my diabetes? If you are a very young person, first the question that the doctor will ask is, what is your age? What is your age? When someone says that, hey, I'm my age is somewhere close to 22 or less than 30 years, immediately doctor will say, don't worry, you don't need to worry too much about it. You are very unlikely that you will get diabetes. And if your age is greater than 30 years, definitely the doctor will suggest you to go for a diabetes test. Because as per universal standards, 30 years, the people who are less than 30 years are very less likely to become diabetic patients. Right? So the doctor cannot go and talk to each and every person, say like, go for a diabetes test. No, which is not preferred. Right? In general, that's one of. So predictive analytics is something that is going to generate the data for future. By using all your historical data, predictive analytics is something which is going to help us to generate the data for future. If I wanted to predict whether a person is likely to become a diabetic patient or not, what are the parameters that I'm going to consider? I'm going to see what is his age. I'm going to see what are the habits that he has. Or is it a person consumes alcohol? Is this person consumes or smokes? Or what is the age of this person? What is the skin fold thickness? What is the height? What is the weight? And what is what are the other parameters that we will consider? And then using that, we can produce the data for future. Like, this is something that this person is likely to become a diabetic patient in future. By taking all the historical data of sales, maybe starting from 2010 to 2020, by taking all the historical data of sales, we can also predict the future for future sales. We are going to build an algorithm for this. How are we going to do? By using all this historical data, we'll feed all this historical data to a machine learning algorithm, and the algorithm is going to provide us the future. The algorithm will help us to provide the future. So here, what is machine learning? What is the purpose of using machine learning? And we will understand those terms in few minutes. We'll just take few more minutes and then we'll try to understand those terms again. But let's try to understand it here, what is going to happen for data. So that's when. So if you see, the people who are going to work in data science or people who are going to work as a data modelers are going to work in these areas where you will also be using the historical data and you're going to produce the data for future. You're going to solve the problems that cannot be solved by the diagnostic analytics people or descriptive analytics people. Yes, you're going to use the same data. You're not going to use a different data. You're going to use the same data, but you're going to solve the problems which cannot be solved by these business analysts, or which cannot be solved by these ETL people, which cannot be solved by this business intelligence people. To solve these even more complex problems using the same data, you may have to write even more complex algorithms. You may have to write even more complex queries to do even more deep dive into the data. So as you could see in the x-axis, we have something called difficulty, which is going to get increased. The amount of difficulty that you will go through your data will increase. The amount of time that you take to process your data will also increase for each and every step. And the value add will also increase. The value add that you are going to add to the organization will also increase by using this each and every one step. So data science will add more value, because if you can understand how much sales that I'm going to produce, that I can expect for the future, that will make the organizations very easy to build their future or plan for their future. Okay, if I say like, hey, tomorrow you're going to get a sales of maybe some 2 millions. Okay, to reach the requirement of 2 millions, what is the inventory that I need to procure? What are the raw materials that I need to procure? So based on that, I will make my plans. Because if you overproduce it, it's going to be an overburden for you. You're going to lose the money. If you underproduce it, even though there is a demand, you cannot reach that demand because you have underproduced those products. So which is very difficult for organizations to maintain. So without having this future data, none of the organizations cannot proceed further to manage their inventory or manage their resources they have. The value added is going to be very high if you can build this. And then prescriptive analytics. Okay, you have given results, Yori. Okay, you have given results to your business saying that, okay, this is what is going to happen. Okay, how to implement it is what we call it as prescriptive analytics. And that's what the way that you take those output terms and you take the results, and then how do you make it happen, and that's what the next level is. Okay, so what is the scope? Yeah, as I was talking about these multiple layers, yes, there are a number of different layers that we have, like programmer, ETL people, business analyst, data statistician, etc., etc. So if you take the same image, if you go a little more deeper, little more inside it, I'm just trying to show that over here. So how it will look like. As you could see, the scope of a data scientist will lie across all these streams. It's not something that you are only doing your predictive analytics. In order to do your predictive analytics, you should also see the future data. You should also extract the historical data. You should be depending on all these terms. You should be able to go to a data quality checks. You should be able to do descriptive analytics. You should be able to do diagnostic analytics, and also to produce the predictive analytics as well. Because the scope of a data scientist will lie across. You should be able to do whatever all these people can do. You want to do some ETL job, yes, you should be having that knowledge. And if you want to do a business analyst role, you should be capable of doing it. Is it something that you need to learn all these things? No. The process that makes you to build predictive analytics itself will enable you to learn all these things. You are not required to learn all these things individually. So if it requires, because you're not going to work, or you're not going to work as a data analyst, or you're not going to work as a business analyst. So these people who are in these roles will continue to do their job, and you will continue to do your job by building the predictive analytics. But you should be capable of going across any of this part, and you should be able to influence these people. Let's say, for example, to do some predictive analytics, you need some data to be captured, which is not being captured already. So you may have to go and influence the people who are working in ETL. You may have to go and say like, hey, I don't have this so and so called historical data. I want you to start extracting this data for me. Yes, you need to influence. You should be able to influence these people. You can also say like, hey, this particular report is not available. It would be very nice for me if you can produce this data for me so that I can make use of it. Yes, you should be able to influence them. If requires, you should also be able to build your own dashboards. You should be having those capabilities as well being science. And semantic analytics, as you could see, the next level of it is nothing but about building or using the even more complex data. Let's say, for example, you wanted to depend on some social network. You wanted to understand, okay, you are working for an entertainment industry, for an example. Maybe you wanted to understand whether this particular movie is released into the market. Okay, is it movie is a hit movie, or is it a flop movie, or is it something like an average movie? So that if I can understand what are the thoughts of people, what people are thinking about this movie, so I can understand to take further steps. Do I need to really increase the publicity for this movie? I see that a lot of people are liking it, but I don't see the sales which is related to it. So because the movie is good, but I still see that, okay, it didn't went well into the market. So I can build some analytics on top of it. I will say, okay, let's increase this. You need to understand those things, right? So how can you do it? You cannot keep on doing like how people used to do in the olden days. You cannot go and talk to each and every person who saw the movie. You just simply depend on the social networks. See how people are giving the comments. See what kind of comments that people are giving. Is it a positive comment or is it a negative comment? Out of 1,000 people who are giving comments, if more number of people are saying like the movie is good, or then you can think like, okay, the movie is really doing well. So that business people can take a lot of decisions. Okay, the movie is released in United States, and then I see that, okay, a lot of people are very much positive about this movie, so I can take a decision whether can I distribute the movie in China, or can I distribute the movie in India. What is the likelihood that I can get succeeded? So you can do all this. People will do all these analytics by depending on this so-called social network and all these things, where to take some high-level business decisions using these analytics. Okay, so this is how this is where your analytics is required for a business in order to, because who will be doing all these things, because none of the people will have capability to build all these things. You need to understand, because your data cannot just like that give you the or produce the predictive or future data, because you need some tools and technologies that can help you to predict these things. Because when you have, let's say for example, when you have millions of records, you cannot manually go and ask a business analyst to understand or to come up with some output out of it, which is highly impossible for a human beings to do. And that's where we'll be depending on these machines. That's where we'll be depending on these machines to do our job, which we cannot do. Okay. So now let's try to understand. Okay, I'm saying like, okay, there are a number of multiple things that you can solve, but let's try to understand what is the typical workflow of a data science project. What is the typical workflow of a data science project that a data scientist or a data science person will be doing in a daily routine? So what are the things that people will follow? What are the steps what are the life cycle of a data science project? First of all, let's try to understand that here. The first step or the first thing a data scientist must be doing is understanding the business. You should be able to understand the business first of all. Okay. I'm working in the manufacturing industry where there is always a problem for my business to understand the demand. What is the demand for the next month? What is the demand for the next quarter? You need to understand. My business is finding it very difficult to estimate the demand, to make sure that your all the raw materials and everything will be procured in a better way. I need to understand whether this claim, okay, let's say if, for example, you're working for an insurance company or maybe an automobile insurance, what is the probability that, what are the chances that this particular claim can become a fraudulent claim? It's not that you're going to review you're going to sit and then you're going to review each and every application in detail. So if you continue to do it, you have to spend a lot of manual hours over there. For insurance companies, in order to understand whether is this claim is going to be or likely to be a fraudulent claim or not, you have to spend a lot of time. You have to make a business analyst or a domain expert to spend a lot of time, which will take a lot of manual hours, of course. So rather than making a business analyst to spend a lot of time on all these applications, let's say for example, on a regular basis, an insurance company will receive somewhere close to 10,000 applications on regular basis. So if you wanted to review all these 10,000 applications to understand what are likely to be fraudulent claims or what are not likely to be non-fraudulent claims, so it will require a lot of time. It will require a lot of manual hours, which also involves in terms of investing a lot of money on top for you, for the organizations, right? So rather than doing that manual hours, if I can build an algorithm, if the algorithm will consume all the input data and will give you the results, okay, this particular insurance or this particular claim is very less likely to become a fraudulent claim. If this particular so and so in claim is likely to be a so and so called fraudulent claim, if you can provide that, where you can filter out straight away, we can filter out some 8,000 or 6,000 of applications, where you will say like, okay, these are the out of 10,000 applications we received, these are the 4,000 claims or the either 5,000 claims which are likely to become the default claims, or either which are likely to become a fraudulent claims. If you can do that, you are straight away going to reduce your 50% of your manual effort, right? 50% of your manual effort can be automated, can be directly reduced in terms of in the way that you, in terms of the cost that organizations are spending a lot, right? So these are business problems that you need to understand. Okay, this is the problem and that my business is facing, so I need to understand, okay, should I solve this problem? And that's the very first step. You should be having a domain knowledge of these things. I'll talk about what is domain knowledge and what is the scope of domain knowledge in a couple of minutes, but this is your first step. After understanding that, the very next step that you need to do is, what is the data that I have? In order to solve this particular problem, what is the data that I have? Do I have enough amount of data? Am I capturing the enough amount of data to solve this particular problem? Okay, I wanted to predict a model that can predict whether this insurance or this claim is likely to become a default claim or not, or either an fraudulent claim or not. Do I have enough amount of data that I'm capturing? You need to understand your data. If you don't have the data which can solve the problem, yes, you again need to start working with your ETL people or whatever the other sources that you have. You need to start extracting the data, because nothing can be done in data science without historical data. If there is no historical data, there is nothing that you can do. You can do any data science work only by having historical data. There is nothing that you can do without historical. And if someone comes and say like, hey, I will give you $1 million, can you build some predictive analytics for me where I don't have the historical data? No. Even though if the person says that 1 million or $1 billion, whatever it is, nothing can be done without historical data. So you should be having as much historical data as possible to build these machine learning algorithms or to build some predictive analytics on top of the data, and without which none can do. So understand the data. If the data is not available, start capturing the data. Okay, you understand the data, and then you will say, okay, I have enough amount of data to solve this problem. And what you need to do? You need to build your algorithms. To build your algorithms, you need to start extracting the data. Let's say, for example, some data might be available in your warehouse systems, or some data might be available in maybe in another region. Let's say you wanted to solve a problem of universal problem for your organization. Let's say you will extract some data from Middle East. You will extract some data from maybe from Asia. You will extract some data from maybe from Australia or maybe from US. So you need to combine all these things. You need to extract all the data at one location. You need to start importing your data into the place where you wanted to build your machine. Most likely, you will be building your algorithms in your machine. So you will start extracting the data, and then you will try to store the data into one location from multiple places. You may have to start merging this data. Let's say, for example, hey, I have some data available in a server called Middle East, or I have some other data which is available in central US. Maybe you may have to start clubbing all these data sets, right? So generating this data will be done by the respective people. If the data is already available for you, you can go and start capturing it. If the data is not available, you should start influencing the people, saying, hey, I want to extract this data also. Can you start extracting? Okay, that's how people do. And you will be importing your data, whatever the data that you think that can solve this problem, you will start importing this data into one location. And very importantly, and you will be spending a lot of time in terms of data cleaning or manipulation of your data. What do we mean by data cleaning here? Let me take a simple example. Whatever the data that you will be referring, either you are extracting the data from any warehouse system or anywhere, do not assume or do not think like your data is going to be as clean as possible. Do not or do never assume. From wherever you are extracting, you might be extracting your data from a data warehouse. Your data warehouse might be very highly matured and very clean data that you might have in your data warehouses, but do not or do never get into the assumption at any point of time. The data is going to have a number of issues as much as possible. The data is going to be as dirty as possible for you in most of the cases. When I say dirty means, what do I mean? It is not that it's going to have some wrong values. It's always going to have the correct values. But for us, it's going to be very dirty. Because let me take an example to understand this. Let's say, for example, you are trying to extract the data from Middle East, some data from one data set from Middle East, and you're going to extract some other data set from maybe from Asia, from another region maybe. So when you see a column called gender, there is a column called gender. The people who are in Middle East might enter the gender values as male, female, M-A-L-E male, F-E-M-A-L-E female. Maybe the people who are in maybe another region are entering the gender values as M in single letter or F in a single letter. But what happens if you club these two data sets? You'll have four unique values inside that data set: male, female, M, F. So for us, it is able to understand. We will be able to understand this gender, saying that okay, male M both stands for one value or represents only one value. Female and F both represents only one value. We can understand that, but machines cannot understand. Machines cannot understand this terminology where we have to provide only two values, either by converting everything into a standard format of male or female, or either M or either into any other meaningful format. And that is the data cleaning. So you need to make sure that your data is as clean as possible when you before you apply for any machine learning or before you feed the data to any machine learning algorithm. And that's what you need to do. Or either some places you will definitely see that there are some missing values. You don't have some values present in some of the records. Let's say when you have a column called age, some people might not enter the age. They will just forget, or either they will just wantedly skip it, or you wouldn't have captured that information for some of the people. Maybe what do you need to do? So none of the algorithms will take any data which is having some missing values. So you need to eliminate all those things. So you might have to find other alternatives. Okay, should I delete if there are very less number of records? Should I delete those records, or either if there are more number of observations or a number of records that we have which has got missing values, how do I replace those missing values? Should I consider another alternative? Okay, rather than considering the age as is, should I replace that missing values with an average age? Okay, because I'm extracting the data from a software company, and most of the software people are expected to be like age lies between so and so called 30 years or 35 years. Can I just replace with an average of other people's age? Can I replace those missing values, or can I depend on any other way? Okay, I have some other column. Okay, I see that there is one column called years of experience. So using this years of experience, can I derive a formula that can also feed my data called age? So you need to find out those alternatives. You need to find to fill those missing values. If you're not able to fill those things, just eliminate those missing values. So this is a process of data cleaning and manipulation, which you should be doing it before you go to for statistical modeling or machine learning. Once you're done with this data cleaning and manipulation, you're going to feed your data to your algorithm or statistical models. You're going to build a model out of this. Because in data science, basically, most of the things will be done by your algorithms itself. You want to build a model that can give you the future data. You don't need to generate the data. Your algorithms itself will generate the data for you. Only thing that you need to do is just feed all the data to your algorithm. The algorithm itself will take care of building the models which can generate the output for you. Like when I say output means the future data, how much sales is going to be, or whether this particular person is likely to become a fraudulent person or not, or is it claim is going to be fraudulent transaction or not, or fraudulent claim or not. The algorithm itself is going to do that job. So only thing that you need to do is make sure that you are feeding a proper historical data to your algorithm. So we will talk in detail about what is machine learning and what you need to do, what is the life cycle of a machine learning and how the machine learning will work. But this is the flow of any data set. And once you start producing your results, once you start producing your future data, it is not something that people will just like that will throw all the data to the business people. No. If requires, you may have to build some visualizations, because always visualizations are the best way to represent the data or best way to present the data to your business people or either to the end customers. That is the best way to do that, because visually people can understand things very easily rather than you providing some numbers and asking them to take actions with respect to the data. So business people will always like to look at the reports, and that's where if requires you may have to build the visualizations. In some of the organizations, they might have a separate team. They might have a separate team who will build the visualizations. They might have separate teams who build the visualizations. If requires, being a data scientist, you should be capable of building those visualizations, and that's what we are going to also learn using Python. Now, if you look at it, understanding the business can be done by a business analyst also, or an ETL person also, or data importing also can be done by a data engineer also. An ETL person also can do this data importing, and data cleaning and manipulation can also be done by a data engineer or an ETL developer also. But here comes the main difference: statistical modeling. Statistical modeling and machine learning is something that's what we will be doing it. We are the only people who are going to have this capability. Yes, visualization can also be done by visualization experts. You are not required to do that. And this is where you will be called as a data scientist. By knowing this part, by able to implement this part alone will make you a data scientist. Okay. Other roles can be done by other people also. Can be done by. But this is very critical and very important. Based on this statistical modeling, based on the way that you are going to build your machine learning, your way that you are extracting your data might change. The way that you are importing your data might change. The way that you are cleaning your data will show a lot of effect, because it is not that you are going to do only cleaning part as how your ATL person is doing. So a lot of things will influence these terms based on the statistical modeling and machine learning, and that is what we are also going to understand in a couple of minutes. What is the difference between the way that others will be working and the way that we will be working? But to understand those things, we should understand first of all what is machine learning. And if you understand what is machine learning, what are the things that you are going to do in machine learning, then easily you will be able to understand what do I mean by data cleaning, what do I mean by data understanding, what do I mean by data. So as you could see, if on overall, what are the skills that you should be having? So on an overall, you should be good at the major three pillars of data science, which is, or major three pillars of any organizations, which is computer science or IT background, IT knowledge, mathematics or statistical knowledge, and very importantly, domain or business knowledge. So these are the major three components that you should be having understanding, or you should be having some fair understanding on all these things. So what is the difference? What is the difference compared to other people? Yes, in an organization, you will see some people who are good in terms of doing your computer science or having some computer or IT knowledge, who can do all the programming and everything. Mathematics and statisticians will be very good in terms of writing some statistical models, and then they will be definitely able to do all their job. And people who are working in domain or business knowledge also will be able to do their job very nicely. But why data science? Why a data scientist is needed? So the way that, or the roles and responsibility of a computers or IT person will only limited up to writing a program and doing whatever that is required to do programmatically, or extracting some data, doing the job only. As role of a mathematics or statistician is only limited for building some statistical models and to extract something out of it. Let's say, for example, he wanted to build a model which can help you to say, okay, if I give a warranty for 2 years, let's say, for example, it's a manufacturing industry again. Let's say you're saying like, hey, if you give a warranty for a bulb for 2 years, maybe you're manufacturing bulbs, for example. If you give a warranty for 2 years, you will be able to gain some good amount of profits. And or if you do this kind of promotions, you will be able to increase your profits up to this much. That is the only limitation that mathematics or statisticians will work with. I'm just giving a simple example here. So business or domain knowledge, okay, they can understand their domain. Okay, this is the way that business should run. This is the way that you should start working with your business. Okay, rather than approving a loan directly, you take the application and then this is how you need to do it. Okay, these are the terms and conditions that you have. So these are the people who will be having this. Whereas if you look at mathematics or statisticians might have some knowledge on domain, of course, but they will be lack of computer or IT background. They don't know how to extract the data. They don't know how to build an ETL job. They don't know how to start crawling the data from a social network. They were not capable of doing it because their knowledge is limited only up to mathematics or statistics. Or even business people can not understand this computer's background or either mathematics and statistics. Maybe up to some little extent, but they were not capable of doing all those things. So considering these limitations of each and every people who are working in IT, mathematics and business domain, so people need someone who can do all these activities to build something called predictive analytics. And that's when the role of a data scientist is being created, who can do computers and IT background work, who can understand the mathematics and statistics, who can also have or understand some knowledge or related to domain or business. And that's where you, being a data scientist, you should be good in all these terms. It is not that you are required to become an expertise in all these things, but you should be having some fair understanding on all these terms. You should be having fair understanding. It's not that, okay, you need to learn everything that is available in statistics, not required. You should be having fair understanding, or you should be able to understand the statistical related concepts or statistical related terms and terminologies being in data science. Okay. So now let's try to understand what is that. We are talking about machine learning. What is that we are going to talk about? What is machine learning? What is machine learning, first of all? What do we do with machine learning? What is the purpose of having machine learning? Let's try to understand that. What is machine learning? As the name says, making your machine to learn. Making your machine itself to learn and understand what happened. You're going to feed all your historical data to a machine, where your machine will go through all the historical data points. Okay, a person with age less than 30 years, a person with an experience of only 2 years, who is working in a private organization, is more likely to become a defaulter. A person who has 35 years with maybe 8 years of experience, who is working in a private organization, is very much likely to become all the EMIs. Right? So who is going to become a defaulter? What kind of factors which are influencing a particular person to become a defaulter? Yes, by looking at some historical data, you can understand. Okay, if you have very few number of observations, by looking at those, when I say observation, in statistically, data engineers will always mention a record. If you take a data, for example, you will have something called a record 1, record 2. Statistically, we will always mention the records as an observation. So here, one line, one set of data, one person related data, you'll call it as an observation. So if the number of observations that we have is limited, yes, of course, being humans, we can understand it. But if a number of observations that you have is millions of records, how can you understand it? How can you go through all the million records to understand the critical patterns or to identify the critical patterns within this data? Being humans, it is not possible for us. That's where we'll be depending on these machines. That's where we'll be depending on these machines. Okay. So here you should be understanding one thing very important. You should have as much historical data as possible. As I said, nothing can be done without historical data. But if you have more amount of historical data, it will make your machine to understand or to make it more matured will become very easy. So let's take a simple example. Yes, we all know that there are a lot of machines are also available, but what is this something called machine learning? Let's try to understand with a general term, with a very basic example. So we humans will learn everything based on our experiences. How do we know that this is the way we should talk to others? How do we know that this is the way that I need to dress? Or when I'm going to office, this is the way I should dress? Or if I'm going for a party, this is how I should dress? Or how do I know that, okay, this is the way that I need to drive a vehicle? Because we have learned all these things through an experience. We have looked at our ancestors. We have looked at our parents. We have looked at our friends. We have looked at our teachers. And based on their experiences, we have learned all these things. We have gone through those experiences to make ourselves more and more mature. The person who has gone through an experience of data science or a data scientist will understand the terms of data scientist. When we are listening to this class, which means that you are going through the experiences that I have already gone through, and that's where you are able to understand these terms. When you are when you say you are learning a vehicle, when you learning how to drive a vehicle, which means you would have learned it from your friend, or you would have learned it from an instructor, which the person has already experienced in that, and then you have learned it very easily. More amount of experience will make you people to become more mature. So that's where we'll say, okay, if the experience or the years of experience increases, the person will become more expertise. And if the age of a person will increase, then the person will become more and more mature. In the same way, if you feed more amount of historical data to a machine, the machine will become more and more mature. So what is the difference between a normal machine versus a machine learning enabled machine, or either a smart bot we call it as? What is the difference between these two? A machine is something which will only follow the instructions. In the same way that you are going to write a program called if statements and all those things. If this so and so thing is happening, you do this activity. Only follows the instructions. Let's say, for example, just to make you understand what do we mean by what is the difference between these two. A machine will just simply blindly follow the instructions. Let's say I'm now sitting at my office room, and if I call a machine, if I call a normal machine, if I ask this machine to go and bring a water bottle for me, so I need to give each and every instruction in detail, saying that okay, you go straight, you take left, and then you open the refrigerator, and then you bring the water bottle for me. I need to give an instruction. Let's say maybe tomorrow I might be sitting maybe in my lawn, and then if I call the same machine, because the input has changed, the place that I'm sitting is changed, I need to give another instruction again. I need to again instruct the machine saying that hey, you go straight, you take left, you take another right, and then bring the water bottle for me. Because the input has changed. For each and everything that your machine, for each and every action that you want your machine to perform, you need to give a detailed instruction to that machine. But it's not the way that your machine learning powered or machine learning enabled machine will work. You give as many examples as possible. You tell the machine that okay, this is how you need to do, this is how you need to behave. Automatically the machine itself will understand. I don't need to keep on giving instructions. Even though I'm at a different room, and then if I call the machine itself will understand what to do. It itself will take decisions on its own. You are not required to continue to give those instructions for a machine learning enabled machine, which we call it as bots, smart bots in general, right? So that is the difference between it. For everything, you need to give an instruction. If there are no instructions given, a machine cannot perform anything. But a bot, a smart bot, can take instructions on its own. To make this machine more and more mature, you should provide more amount of historical data so that your machine will become more and more experienced. Is this something that you are going to build a different machine in this way? No. You are going to write a different program, different way of programming for these machines, for these smart bots? No. You're going to use same if-else statements. You're going to use same kind of programming, but the way that your program will work will change. The way that your machine learning algorithms will work will change, that can result in terms of taking those right decisions at the right time. Right? So that can help people to these machines to take right decisions at right time. So what are these algorithms, first of all? Machine learning is a combination of n number of different algorithms. Each and every algorithm will have its own purpose. Let's say, for example, I wanted to predict a continuous variable. We have something called a linear regression algorithm. I wanted to predict a binary outcome. Like say, for example, your outcome is expected to be yes or no. We have something called a logistic regression algorithm. So based on the input data that you are using, based on the output data that you are going to produce, there are n number of algorithms that we have to serve our purpose. Algorithms are already created and are already available for us in the market. So being in this data science, you should be understanding what are these algorithms, what this algorithm will do, how this algorithm will read the data, how this algorithm will process this data. So first of all, the flow of an algorithm will be like this. You should be having your historical data, as I said. First step is like you should be having all this historical data. When I say historical data means yes. Let's say for example, you're trying to predict a person will become a defaulter or not in a particular bank. So you should have the historical data. Who are the people who become defaulters? Who are the people who haven't become defaulters? You should collect all the historical data. and you feed the data to an algorithm. You feed the data to a machine learning algorithm, let's say, for example, linear regression in this case. You feed all these in, sorry, it's classification problem, right? We should say logistic regression, for example. You feed all that input data to your algorithm. Algorithm will start reading all that historical data points. This process where you will feed the data to your algorithm, the algorithm will go through each and every data point, each and every observation, and will try to produce a model as an output. So the algorithm will produce a model as an output. That model can be used to give or predict whether this particular person is likely to become a defaulter or not. So today, it's 28th March here. If a new person comes on 28th March in the second half and then say like, hey, I wanted to apply for a loan. Can you approve a loan for me or not? So I'm going to use the model which is generated by this algorithm. I'm going to use the model which is generated by this algorithm, and I will use that model to predict, okay, I will take all of his inputs saying that, okay, what is the years of experience, or what is the number of what is the salary that you have, and whether you own a own house or not. Such independent variables, I'll collect all the input variables from him, and I will feed that information to this model. So if a new person is coming, let's say for example, this is the input, right? When I'm saying like a new person is coming, whatever the inputs that I feed it while training the model, I need to feed the same inputs to this model, and this input will be consumed by this model to produce the result, saying that it will get the prediction, saying that, okay, yes, considering these inputs, the model will give you a result saying that yes, I can approve the loan straight away, or else I can reject the loan straight away. So based on that, people can take respective decision, saying that yes, based on your so and so called inputs, your loan is approved, your loan is rejected, or something like that. So what is the difference here? What is the difference that you are making here? To make it very simple, how this algorithm is going to work in a very simplest manner, to understand these things in a very simple manner. Let me show you this simple. So basically, when you take any of the program, so you will write programs. Basically, you will write programs. So if you have some input, let's say for example, I have some input called X. Maybe I have some input called X. If you wanted to produce some output called Y, you will be writing some a formula for it. You will be writing some program for it. X is equal to, in order to mx plus c is equal to y. So to produce some output using this input, you will write a formula saying that, okay, you will write a program maybe. So by using this m and c as a values, you will multiply your x with m value and c value, where you will have some dedicated m and c values, and then you will be able to produce your output. When your input changes, let's say for example, my input has changed. Okay, I'm not getting only x as an input. My input is changing here. Maybe I have something called x1, x2 as my input. So you cannot use the same program that you have written already, right? So this is never going to work. This will never work. So you have to change your program based on your new inputs that you received. Maybe you should say like m1 x1 plus m2 x2, m2 x2 plus c1 c2, c1 c2, c1 plus c2. That will produce your output called y in this case, because your input has changed, and because of which you cannot use the same program again and again. So that's what I said. When you're giving your instruction to your machine for every every type of input that you are feeding, you should change your program. You should continue to change your program. And this is the way that a normal program will work, or this is the way that a normal machine will work. But what about machine learning? And machine learning is nothing but you will have an algorithm. This algorithm is going to take whatever the input that you feed. This algorithm is going to take something called your input, and this itself will generate a program as an output. So earlier case, you are going to write a program. In this case, you are not going to write a program. You are going to build an algorithm. The algorithm itself will generate a program for you as an output, and then this program can be used to produce your results. This program itself will give you, this algorithm itself will give you something called mx plus c or something like this. So if your input is changed, let's say for example, now in this case, you are getting x1 comma x2. Okay. So maybe tomorrow you are trying to feed these inputs called x1 comma x2. You don't need to touch anything. Just feed the updated input, whatever the new inputs that you got, which this algorithm itself is going to produce a program for you, saying that, okay, m1 x1 plus m2 x2 plus c1 plus c2, something like this. It itself is going to change the program based on the inputs that you have fed, which can help you to produce your output. So you're not required to keep on changing your program. The algorithm itself will produce, the algorithm itself will produce the program for you. In the case that we are discussing here, if you see, when I say program means the model will be referred as a program. So when I say program, I'll say, okay, this is your historical data, and you're going to train your algorithm using your historical data, and where the algorithm is going to produce some model as an output. When I say program means here in this example, yes, program is nothing but your model, like the formula that we created, mx plus c or m1 x1 plus c or something like that. So this is the model. So this model can be used to get your generate your predictions for your future. Yes, in this case, yeah, I'm just saying like to understand this very simple functionality, I just written a simple function over here, but this is not the way that every algorithm will work. Every algorithm will have a different kind of formulation, different kind of problem or program that will be generated. So once you build this model, let's say for example, this model may not be used for your entire lifetime. The way that you are predicting your sales, the way that you are generating your output might change. Your historical data trends would have completely changed. In those cases, you should start retraining the model once again and then to produce a new model out of it. So once I build this linear regression algorithm, for example, this linear regression algorithm can be used to solve any predicting a continuous variable at any point of time, not irrespective of domains. Irrespective of any domain, you can use this linear regression, whatever the data that you have chosen. Okay. So based on the inputs, your model will change. Let's say, for example, while training your model, if you feed some wrong data to it, okay, whatever the historical data that you are feeding, you're trying to feed some garbage to your algorithm. Of course, the model, it's going to definitely generate some model, but this model will produce some bad results. So if you feed garbage in, it will produce garbage out. So you should be very careful in terms of identifying what quality data that you are feeding to an algorithm, or is it something that are you feeding proper inputs to it, or are you feeding proper input data or enough amount of historical data to it, which will result in building a correct model for you. If you are feeding wrong data, obviously it will produce a wrong model, which can give you wrong predictions. It will produce the model. There are no issues in that, but it's going to give wrong predictions completely, and that's not the way that you will expect the model to work. What type of historical data that we need to use? What is the historical data? And based on the type of problems that we have in machine learning, we have very different, there are even different types of algorithms like supervised learning algorithms, unsupervised learning algorithms and all, which I'm going to talk about those things in few minutes. Okay. If the model changes based on the inputs. Let's say for example, hey, I'm trying to feed some data related to insurance company. Yes, based on your insurance company data, this model will change based on the input observations or input values that you're trying to provide, or the input columns that you're trying to provide. Based on that, your model will change. Your model will change based on your data completely. Based on your input data, your model will change. Let's say for example, you're feeding some 4 or 5 columns. Based on that, it will produce the respective model. Okay, so your input data does matters a lot here. Okay, all right. So what are these inputs? What kind of data that you need to feed? What kind of data that you need to feed these models? And based on the type of data that we are feeding, to each and every algorithm, there are, or based on the type of data that we produce as an output, there are classifications. Machine learning itself has some classification. Yes, you would have already learned something called artificial intelligence, IoT devices, machine learning, etc., etc., etc. So let's try to understand what is artificial intelligence and where exactly we will work with machine learning. What is the relation between artificial intelligence versus machine learning, and within machine learning, and what are the categories we have? So, okay, let's try to understand this. Let's try to understand what is artificial intelligence. As the name says, artificial intelligence. You're going to build some intelligence which is artificial. What do you mean by intelligence? Brain which can understand the things, which can take decisions. You're going to build an artificial intelligence. Whatever the technologies which are used to build robots, whatever the technologies which are used to build the highly advanced robots, highly advanced machines like the bomb detectors, and then or either the humanless cars, all these things, or robots you will see where they themselves will take actions on their own. So they will have their own brain. They will have their own thinking system. They themselves can start improving themselves. The movies that you would have seen in Avengers, the movies you would have seen in the so and so called Transformers, those machines will behave. Nobody will be there to command them. So they themselves will start working. So, even the older movies that you see, iRobot and all those things. So those are the technologies people will use, artificial intelligence. So if you consider artificial intelligence as a book, this is what the example that I'll say to most of my students. If you consider that artificial intelligence as a complete book, where machine learning is the first chapter within that, to solve the problems, to handle the data which is related to the data, and machine learning is the first chapter. Machine learning that deals with the kind of data that you have in a structured format. Machine learning is something that you can deal with the data which is available in a structured and numerical format. There are classifications in statistically. We have multiple classifications of data, but I'm going to explain about what is statistics, what is in statistically, what kind of data that we have, how the data can be categorized as what is categorical data, what is continuous variables, what is there are some categories we have in statistics, and there we will talk in detail about what is that. But for machine learning is something which is used on top of numerical, which will work on top of numerical data, where the data is available in a format of numbers, and that can be used, and the algorithms which are available under this can be used on top of such. Okay, as I was talking about some text-related data, what are the type of data? Structured data, unstructured data, or semi-structured data, right? Forget about semi-structured data, and because the kind of log files and all those things, we cannot do much over there. Okay, so if we consider structured data and unstructured data that we have in this world is existing. So what is structured data? As you can see, tables and all these things will be called as a structured data. Coming to the unstructured data, what is unstructured data? Text data is one level of text data. The data which is available in text format. What do we have to handle the data? In data science, what are the techniques or technologies we have to handle the text data? So you wanted to build, let's say for example, you want to understand how people are responding to this movie. What kind of reviews that people are giving for a particular movie? You will read all those tweets, or you will read all the Facebook likes and everything, and you will build some sentiment analysis on top of it, which will tell you whether this particular comment is positive comment or a negative comment. So that is called sentiment analysis. So which is part of NLP techniques. So machine learning to deal with numbers, when you have some text formatted data, you are going to use something called NLP, natural language processing. We also call it as text mining. So you need to learn NLP techniques to do something out of the text formatted data. So what is if you go beyond, if you go to even more complex data, what are the things? Image format, video format, image recognition. So if you go to some of the web pages, some web pages will give you some images. If you wanted to proceed further on it, they will randomly display some 15 or 16 images. They will say, select the images which has got a school bus, which has got a road. So is it something that someone is continuously providing all these images and then validating whatever that you are selecting is correct or not? No. Those things will be implemented with the help of image processing. Those automations or the way that you will log into these things are created with the help of image processing. And what are we calling it as? Whenever you open your mobile, as of now, you are not even required to enter your pattern, or you are not even required to enter a number to reveal your mobile, to open your mobile. Just keep it in front of your face. It is going to recognize your face. It's going to identify your face, and then it's going to unlock your phone. So how is it happening? The people have built an algorithm which can capture your face and which can identify whether you are the right person who is trying to open the phone or not, which is called image processing. Your face will be recognized as an image, and it will process whether is it the person who is the owner of this phone or not. And how, if you take an example of voice recognition, people are creating all these machines who can understand any language, try to convert into any other language. Voice recognition. Even when you open Siri, Siri will identify whether you are the right person who is trying to give the commands. It will identify, and then based on your voice, it will process your voice and it will give you the results. All these are algorithms in the back end, so which is called as voice recognition. If you are building something called an humanless car, it's going to have some cameras. The cameras are going to visualize everything. They are going to understand. They are going to recognize. Okay, this particular object is a human or not? Is this particular object is a road or so that I can move the vehicle or not? Is there an obstacle or not? It's going to visualize everything. Computer vision. CV is something which is used to process your so and so called video. Right? So these are combinations of algorithms in data science. Up to what level that you want it to go? Do I need to restrict myself only up to machine learning? It's up to you. Do you want it to start exploring more and more about the opportunities or the problem statements that we have with NLP techniques? That's up to you. Everything is data science. You're trying to do something out of data, either it is structured data or unstructured data. Okay? A subset of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence will have even more complex algorithms like a Markov chain, hidden Markov chains, deep learning, and all those things, which are part of artificial intelligence. You are not required to learn artificial intelligence completely. That is completely different stream. So in data science, we are expected to learn these things like machine learning. So based on the type of data that we feed to a machine learning algorithm, based on the output that we wanted to produce out of the machine learning algorithm, machine learning algorithms are again categorized into three categories. Machine learning algorithms are categorized into three categories, which is called as supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. So what is this supervised learning? What is unsupervised learning? Let's try to understand that in high level. Okay. So here, let me take a simple example to understand it. So when you have some data, what is supervised learning? Let me explain what is supervised learning. What kind of algorithms are called as supervised learning algorithms? When you have some data, okay, where you have complete clarity on your data, let's say for example, there is a column called age. You know what do we mean by age column? There is a column called gender. You know what do we mean by gender column? There is a column called the salary of a person. You know what do we mean by salary of a person? You have complete clarity on your data. You know what is this data is meant by. So you have complete clarity on this data, and you will have your output column also in your historical data. Let's say the examples that we just discussed. Sales of an organization. You will have your input columns like this is the date. Okay, in January 2020, this is the sales. In February 2020, this is the sales, and in January 2019, this is the sales. So you have your independent variables and dependent variables, or input columns or output columns. We also call in general terms. And if you have such historical data, the algorithms which can be applied on top of such data, where you have your both input column and output column present in your historical data, the algorithms which are used on top of such data will be called as supervised learning algorithms. What about unsupervised learning algorithms? You will have some data. You might or you might not have clarity on your data. Okay, you have some column, but you might or might not have complete clarity on it, but that's fine. You don't know what is this data is all about, or you don't have complete clarity on what is this meaning of this so-and-so data. That's fine. You might or might not have clarity on your data. In your historical data, you will only have your input columns. There is nothing called output column in your historical data. So the algorithms which are used on top of such data will be called as unsupervised learning algorithms. So in supervised learning algorithms, you will have both in your historical data. I'm talking only about historical data. You will have your input variables and output variable, and that is what the algorithms which are used on top of such data will be called as supervised learning algorithms. So in unsupervised learning algorithms, you will have only your input columns. There is nothing called output column which is present in your historical data. Right? So those algorithms are categorized as unsupervised learning algorithms. I will talk about examples also in few minutes. Okay. So coming to the reinforcement learning algorithm, as I said, supervised learning will have input and output column. Unsupervised learning will have only input columns. What about reinforcement learning? Reinforcement learning is something which you don't even have input columns also. There are no input columns. From day one, you will start extracting your algorithm itself will start extracting your historical data, and it will continue to go. So let me take an example for these supervised learning and unsupervised learning. So basically, supervised learning itself is again categorized majorly into two types of problem statements. Two types of problem statements on overall. So which are considered to be supervised learning algorithm is categorized into regression kind of problem and classification kind of problem. Regression kind of problem and classification kind of problem. So what do we mean by regression? So when you have an output variable which is a continuous number, when you have an output variable which is a continuous number, let's say for example, I wanted to predict what is the sales. Sales is going to be a continuous number. I wanted to predict how many tweets this particular person is going to get, which is a continuous number. The output can be of anything, any number, any continuous number. And how much EMI you have to pay. Let's say, for example, you wanted to predict how much EMI you have to pay for this insurance. If you wanted to get this insurance, or if you want to go for a particular car loan, you want to predict, or if you wanted to get a seat in this particular university, how much donation you have to pay, which are all are continuous variables. So if your expectation is to predict some output column which is a continuous variable, we will call those algorithms as regression algorithms. And classification algorithms. What is classification? You wanted to classify something. Okay, there is one person who is applying for a loan. Can I classify this person as a defaulter or non-defaulter, so that I can approve the loan for the non-defaulter people? A person is trying to understand whether can this particular person can become a diabetic patient or not. Is this person is likely to become a diabetic patient or not? Your outcome is expected to be between yes or no, either yes or no, or either I want to classify whether this particular movie is good or bad or average. So you're trying to classify something between some continuous using some independent variables. You're trying to classify your outcome between some categories that you have. Your outcome is expected to be live between either yes or no, or either average, good, some kind of categories. So the algorithms which are called on top of such data, which are used on top of such output values, we'll call those algorithms as classification problems or classification algorithms. So coming to unsupervised learning algorithm, what is unsupervised learning algorithm? You will only have your input columns. You will only have your independent variables. There is nothing called output variable that you have in your historical data. Let's take an example. Let's say, for example, a manufacturing company has a number of dealers. So usually all the four-wheeler companies will have dealers, right? So they don't sell any products directly to the end customers. They will have dealers. So they will provide the vehicle to the dealers, and the dealers will distribute, or dealers will take care of all the sales and maintenance and all those things. An organization will have a number of dealers. As being a manufacturing company, how can I categorize these dealers? I cannot treat each and every dealer as same, or I cannot give equal priority to each and every dealer. I may have to categorize those dealers as tier 1 dealer, tier 2 dealer, or type 3 dealer. So whatever that I wanted to take some business or high level decisions on, let's say for example, hey, I'm revealing a new car, or I'm launching a new car. For this new car, I'm creating a catalog, maybe kind of a catalog which is very expensive catalog, maybe some kind of where your car details will be maintained or explained very nicely. You are creating a very expensive catalog, like maybe which will cost $100, for example. So I will only give those catalogs only to my tier 1 dealers, where it is not required that I should be providing those expensive catalogs to tier 2 or type 3 dealers. So those business decisions can be taken using this grouping. We call it as clustering. It's nothing but grouping. So do you have those groupings existing in your historical data? No. You're going to consume all these dealers information, and then you will group them, saying that, okay, these are the people who belong to one category, these are the dealers who belong to one category. This is called grouping. where your output column is not existing in the historical data, where you will produce your output column, right? You can also do these things manually, but when you have a lot of data, nobody can depend on humans, right? So which will make the human efforts vary a lot, and then if the humans might tend to do some mistakes, obviously will depend on these machines. And coming to reinforcement learning, as I said, you're not even going to have your historical data like as input columns or output columns. Then how reinforcement learning algorithm will work? Without data, there is nothing that you can try, right? So before I talk about what is reinforcement learning, let me give you an example first of all. What is the implementation? What is an example of reinforcement learning algorithm? Humanless cars. Humanless cars are the best example for the implementation of reinforcement learning. You're going to build a machine which itself can start driving on its own. You don't need historical data for that. What you will do, you will build an algorithm, reinforcement learning algorithm. Using that algorithm, the way that you will evaluate, you will make this machine itself to learn how to behave will be called as training process. If you search for humanless cars in YouTube, if you go to any white papers which are published for humanless cars, you will see a lot of places people have already built humanless cars long before 10 years itself. There were people have already created humanless cars, but why still you are still not able to see those humanless cars on roads? Because when you build those humanless cars, they will take very long time to people will take very long time to make those machines to become more and more mature. They will simulate a lot of regions, they will create a lot of areas where those machines will be going through a process called getting trained for these many years. They will be going through a lot of trainings where people will be monitoring how the car is taking decisions in this particular situation, how this car is. So it is a very lengthier process in real time, because if you take humanless cars, which involves with human risk, right? The human's life is also will be in risk. So if something went wrong, then nobody will be using those humanless cars. That's why the process of making your reinforcement learning algorithm makes it. You will build the algorithm, you don't need historical data. But once you build the algorithm itself will try to generate its own historical data. It itself will try to generate its own historical data to go through whether is it a correct decision or not. Okay, so that's how. Okay. So that's the example of reinforcement learning. Okay, understood. What is supervised learning? What kind of, this is just a categorization. It's not that your algorithms will behave in a different way based on the kind of input or independent variables or dependent variables, based on the kind of data that you feed or that you expect your algorithm to predict. The algorithms are classified like this, like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. As you can see, there are some samples that I am mentioning. This image shows some samples of how or what kind of supervised learning algorithms we have and what kind of unsupervised learning algorithms we have for regression and classification. You can see linear regression, decision trees, random forest, which are algorithms which can help us to predict a continuous variable by taking the historical data of independent and dependent variables. And for classification, we have some other like logistic regression, decision trees, naive Bayes, support vector machines, k nearest neighbor. These are the algorithms which are used for predicting a classification outcome. So when I say supervised learning means, yeah, as I said, continuous variable. So your outcome is expected to be sales. You cannot say like sales is always going to be 1 million or 1.2 million. It can be of any number. So it's just continuous variable. And classification, you will have only classifications. So you'll have say like, okay, whether yes, can I approve a loan or not. This is classification. Coming to unsupervised learning, yes, as I said, there is only independent variables like k-means clustering technique that I was talking about. K-means clustering, principal component analysis, it has a different purpose, which is used for dimensionality reduction. Some like association rule mining, which is used in market basketing techniques, which are used by most likely by the people who are in marketing. So we are going to discuss in detail about each and every algorithm, because I cannot just like that mention like this is how you can do it. This is just a high level overview. I want to present some high level overview over here, where whenever we are going through each and every algorithm, where we are going to understand, okay, why, how linear regression algorithm will work, in what cases we can use linear regression, in what scenarios that we can use k-means clustering, or what kind of problem statements that we can solve with the help of a priori algorithm, which is part of association rule mining. We're going to have in detailed discussion about when we are going through each and every class or each and every session. I said this is just a high level or overview, very high level overview of how it is going to be, how it is, or how it is working. So on a high level, you can understand like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement. We're going to talk about one simple algorithm because, as I said, reinforcement learning algorithm will have very less scope if you look at in real time. And if you consider there are 100 use cases in real time industry, you're going to work with 100 use cases. For example, if there are 100 use cases that you have, most of the use cases will be related to supervised learning. Most of the use cases, 70% of the use cases that you are going to work is going to be supervised learning algorithms, where within the 70%, maybe I should say 80% actually, in real time, if you look at 80% of the algorithms that people are going to work or people will be working will be on supervised learning algorithms. And within this 80%, 50% of or 60% of the algorithms will be the problem statement that you are going to work with classification problems. So you will see more number of use cases. People will be using more number of use cases in terms of classification, and you can see very less number of use cases people will have in terms of predicting a continuous variable if you look at in reality. But very less number of people overall, maybe out of 100, maybe 20% of the use cases where people will work on, maybe I should say 18% of the people will work only in terms of unsupervised learning. Out of 100, maybe only 2 or less than 2% of the people will work on reinforcement learning. It is very less scope because very rare people will get chance to work on reinforcement learning. As I said, it's just something that most of the use cases or most of the domain doesn't require to use people or doesn't require to use reinforcement learning in reality. That's the reality. Okay, as I said, most of the people will be working on supervised learning, and that too you'll see more use cases in classification in the real-time industry. And there'll be definitely few use cases in regression models as well, but you will see more in terms of classification. But as I said, reinforcement learning will have very less amount of scope. But I don't think, as per my experience, I haven't heard or I haven't seen any person who is working in reinforcement learning algorithm in real time. Okay, I haven't heard that. So that's how we can understand how the scope will be. But yeah, some people or some universities might work to create some POCs and all those things, but in reality, it will be very less. Okay, so now, as I said, in order to solve any problem, I wanted to solve a problem. I want to solve this particular problem. You need to, first of all, do some data extraction and clean your data, and then build your statistical model using some machine learning or either NLP techniques or either whatever it is. See, it's all about data. Your data can present at anywhere. Your source data can be, or your data warehouse can be of in any database. Either you can say MongoDB or either Cassandra or either MySQL or either SQL Server, PostgreSQL or anything. You cannot say like I'm a person who will only depend on this, or who will only, I'm a data scientist who will only look at the data which is in SQL Server, or either I only know something called MongoDB. You cannot say like that. Your data can present at any different layer, maybe in an Excel also, in a notepad also, in a .dat file also. You may have to start extracting the data connecting to your particular source. Your data can present at anywhere. And to connect to n number of different sources, or to process do some data cleaning activities to extract the data or to import the data into your location, or to do some data cleanup activities, or we also call it as data transformation, data cleaning, data massaging, or either data pre-processing, everything is same. You can use any tool basically. It is not that you need to use only Python. No, not at all. You can use any tool. You can use any tool to extract your data, because if you, let's say for an example, an organization might start using some Informatica to extract their data as an ETL process. You can also use Informatica if you know that, right? Or else if you are still extracting the data from a data warehouse, maybe from a data warehouse also you should start extracting it. You can create your own pipeline. You can also create your own tools. There are no restrictions at all. But only restrictions that you will see is if based on your organization standards or the way where or to which customer you are working and what are the other tools that they were using. Based on they need, you have to go. Let's take an example. Earlier, we used to have some. I used to work for one of the organization where they have some tool called Alteryx. They have procured license for that tool called Alteryx, where I'm supposed to do all my ETL job, everything using that tool called Alteryx. So I have to learn it. I have to pick up those things, which I haven't worked on Alteryx earlier, but for that to serve for that particular customer, I have learned Alteryx. And if your data is available in big data technologies, you may have to start adopt to those technologies as well. Being a data science, you should not say like, I will be restricting myself to this particular tool. I'll be restricting myself to this particular one. No, you cannot. But ultimately, you're trying to achieve same thing. Either you use Alteryx, either you use Python, either you use R or whatever it is. You are trying to achieve the same activity. But coming to the statistical modeling or building the algorithms. This is where a very important thing that we should understand here. So, as I said, your machine learning algorithm like linear regression, logistic regression, or decision trees, those concepts will remain same. Those algorithms will remain same. The way that those algorithms will work will remain same. Once you build a linear regression algorithm, which can be used on top of any data universal, either it can be any domain or anything. So that's where programming languages called R, which are programming languages called R, Python, Excel sheet, or if you look at some other programming language like Octave, there are programming languages which are dedicatedly have some libraries that are already has the implemented algorithms in them. So linear regression, you're not required to recreate linear regression. It is already created and it is available for you as a library. You just have to import that library, considering that you have your data, you have your clean data. You just have to apply those libraries on top of your data. You just have to use those existing libraries. As I said earlier, and I was working almost 8 or 10 years back in data science, we used to have only very limited programming languages or limited options to apply these machine learning algorithms. We used to work on R, programming language called R. R is of course still very powerful, which is purely a statistical programming language, which can be used only for data scientists. So most preferred programming language used to be R. So Python used to have very little scope, very little number of, like, I think we used to have only linear regression and logistic regression. Those are the only two algorithms which are available in Python. So considering advantages of Python, other advantages of Python, like Python will have a number of libraries. It is very easy to learn and it is very easy to append or extend to your any other programming languages, or either to start extracting any data. You can do a number of things using Python. So considering those things, people in Python started implementing more number of algorithms, which are open source technologies, right? So in the open source community, people started contributing more number of algorithms. If you look at the number of algorithms which are available now in Python libraries, which are more. There are a number of algorithms where people will continue to contribute for open source technologies or open source community, where you can also start implementing those algorithms in using Python. And if you look at your data is available in big data, for example. So we have very limited options here. Spark has a library. In Spark, they have a library called Spark MLib. So they have some algorithms. Okay, 7 or 8 algorithms are implemented. Earlier, when the Spark is introduced, there were almost like 0 algorithms we had. And then they started adding more and more number of algorithms as part of these libraries. So you can use any programming language if you are talking about open source technologies. And coming to the commercial services like SaaS, SPSS. There also you can see, even in SPSS also, SaaS also, you'll be able to see same algorithms. The way that they have implemented might be in a different way, but algorithm concept will remain same. Only thing is that they were using their own servers to implement or to process the data. Okay. The core concept called machine learning will remain same, whatever the technology that you use. So you can use anything. As being in data science, you can use anything. Even if you see some requirements, job positions, especially, you will see something like, we need a data scientist who has knowledge on either in R, either in Python, or either in SPSS. And 99% of the places you will be able to see the same kind of ask for data scientists. Either R, either Python, either SAS, or either SPSS, something like that. But there will be some people who will only expect people to have some knowledge on SAS because they are purely commercial or commercial softwares. That is a little different. But in open source community, you can load anything. But why Python? Because Python is becoming more user friendly. Most of the organizations started implementing Python nowadays. But statistically, if you look at, R has more number of libraries or more number of algorithms, but Python is pitching up really fast into the market. But if you look at in future, Python has already become number one programming language. Most of the people are using it, and also Python also has a number of NLP techniques implemented. So Python is becoming more and more preferred and most contributed open source community as per the current market. It is expected that Python will become only programming language that most of the people will use in future. So based on those things, yeah, Python has a strong investment for future. Okay. So in SAS, in SPSS, there are also, as I said, the commercial services, commercial softwares where you have to procure license. And underneath that, you will be doing the same activity, extracting the data and then building the algorithms and everything. So coming to the visualization, what is the next step that as I mentioned? You need to, once you start producing your results, you cannot just like that throw all the data into your business people. You should start building the visualizations. How do I build visualizations? If you look at R as a programming language, R also has visualization libraries like ggplot and all those things. Using those libraries, you can produce your visualizations. You can produce bar chart, line chart, pie chart, and all those things. Either Python also has some libraries like GraphViz, or either Seaborn, or either Matplot library. There are libraries available in Python where you can build your visualizations using. Some organizations might have some other visualization tools. Let's say, for example, most of the customers that I work with will have their own visualization tools like ClickView, Tableau, Power BI. Once you start producing your results out of your Python algorithm or Python model or either R model or either SPSS or whatever it is, you capture the data somewhere, you store the data somewhere, where your visualizations will start extracting those results, will start producing some dashboards out of it. So in some of the places where they will have some different teams who will work with visualization, who some of the organizations will have separate visualization teams who will work those activities, who will do those activities. Some of the organizations, but if you don't have it, obviously you are the one who's supposed to do. Either by using Python, you produce some graphs out of it and then show those results to the users, or if you have a separate softwares, you may have to start learning those things or understanding how to build a visualization using Tableau, or how do I build a visualization using ClickView and all those things. And other tools, let's say for example, hey, I want to extract the data on real time. I don't batch process where I wanted to extract the data on real time and start processing the data on real time. You may have to have those tools which you need. You just have to say like, hey, I cannot extract the data using real time. I need some tools. Yeah. You identify what are the open source technologies that you have. If you see like, okay, we don't have anything in open source technology, and if your organization allows you to procure some license, go ahead and start procuring those so softwares that you need or the tools that you need. Start extracting the data and start making use of them to build you whatever the algorithms or to run the models or whatever the way that you want it to. That's purely up to you. Being a data scientist, you should be able to understand your requirement. You should be able to identify what are the tools that we need to. Organization might restrict up to some extent because you cannot go and say like, hey, I wanted to use SAS because that involves with cost. But in open source community, yes, you are allowed to do. Most of the organizations will give freedom to data scientists and do whatever that you wanted to, either by using Python, either by using R or whatever it is. They will allow you to produce the results. The only thing that organizations will look at is how good you are able to produce the results. How accurate results you are able to produce. That is the only thing that people will be concerned, especially when you are looking at open source technologies like Python, R, or all. Okay. Now, so if you look at these open source technologies called Python, R, or any other programming languages that are available, it is not that these softwares are only capable of implementing, or you have some libraries. There are some restrictions also. What are those restrictions? Especially with the memory constraints. So let's say, for example, I wanted to build an algorithm out of 16 GB of historical data, for an example. Out of 16 GB of historical data, and I wanted to use that 16 GB of my training data and I want to build some model out of it, where I only have some 4 GB machine to build it, to train the model. Which, forget about building an algorithm. First of all, you cannot imagine to process 16 GB of data in your machine. You may have to have the enough amount of hardware, because everything will be running in memory, either R, either Python, whatever it is. You have some hardware limitations. That's where people will go for these commercial softwares where they have their own server. If you take SaaS, once you loaded the data, your data will be available in SaaS server. SaaS has implemented those algorithms in their server, so your data will be processed, which will have highest memory, right? So your servers will have most of the memory, or have highest bandwidth in terms of hardware capacity. Or else if you say like, okay, I don't want to run this algorithm, you yourself has your own operating system, or either you yourself has some very high end configuration machine, yeah, go ahead and then start installing Python, start processing the data in the server. That nobody stops. That's purely up to what kind of data, or what is your hardware capacity, and how much historical data that you have, and how much RAM, majorly how much RAM that you have in your server, that where you're trying to build this model. Okay, so there are no restrictions. If you say, for example, now earlier it used to be like all the topmost organizations don't used to believe in this open source technologies. Earlier they used to like, okay, if you take a look at banking sector, and if you look at some insurance sector, where especially the finance sectors, they used to have very less confidence on these open source technologies. But considering the way that these open source technologies are proving in the market, compared to the commercial software, these open source technologies are becoming very preferred for all these finance sectors as well, where there are no limitations that people have nowadays. Earlier it used to be like, okay, no, we don't want to depend on this so and so called R, or either something like that. But now each and every organization is started understanding the capabilities of these open source communities and open source technologies, and they started expanding their business towards this open source technologies as well. Very big giant companies are now in purely working in open source technologies, who are depending on these open source technologies, and they were even contributing more for these open source technologies, open source communities. So you cannot say like which kind of use case, or which use case can be implemented using a commercial software, or which kind of use case can be implemented. See, anything can be implemented at either using any technology. There are no restrictions at all. When you say linear regression algorithm will work in the same way that how it works in SAS, or how it works in R, or either but the syntax they would have implemented might be different, but the concept will remain same. The concept, the way that how linear regression algorithm works, linear regression works in a concept called the least squares error method. So it uses a concept called the least squares error method to build a linear regression model. So that concept will remain same, but the way that it is implemented, the way that the library has been written is different. That's it. Okay, and your hardware will depends on how much data, on how much data that you can work with, all those things. But as per the current industry standards, Python is very powerful programming language which can process the data very fast. Okay, so which can process the data very fast compared to other traditional programming languages like Pascal, as someone was talking about. If you see COBOL and all those things, where people used to work on mainframes, right? So mainframes will process your data in a server. That is little different, right? Okay. As I said, these programming languages like Python and R are already implemented these algorithms, and you have those algorithms available in the libraries. So in Python, we have something called sklearn, scikit-learn, which has got more number of libraries, more amount of algorithms which are available in this library. You just have to import that library and then just apply linear regression algorithm. If you see, this is the only line that you have to use to apply, to train your linear regression algorithm with your historical data. This is the only step. But in order to understand what is happening within this linear regression algorithm, using Python, it is not even required that you need to explain this 3 lines of code. It is those who understands Python syntax, they can very easily understand what is happening here. But in order to explain what happens in this linear regression, what is the mathematical calculation which is involved within this linear regression, if I need to explain it, I will take close to 3 hours to complete this process of explaining linear regression, which is called least squares error method, which will take complete 1.5 hour for me to explain about this theory part, only the theory part, where out of those 1.5 hours, whatever that we are going to discuss, we will only implement it within these 3 lines of code. There is a difference here. There is something called a data modeler. There is some position called data modeler versus data scientist. Who is a data modeler? A data modeler is the one who can build a model out using the Python logic, who can produce some results the way that a data scientist is able to create. Where the data modeler doesn't know what is happening within this algorithm. If you go and talk to a data modeler, you will say like, okay, I don't know what is this so-and-so called the least squares error method. I don't know what is happening within that. Only thing that he can tell you is, okay, the syntax, he can give you the syntax. If you given a data, he will be able to build the model and he will be able to produce a model that can give you better results. If you are only restricted for this part, you will be called as a data modeler. You are never or ever will be called as a data scientist. So here, what is a data scientist? A data scientist is a person who knows each and everything inside this linear regression, how a linear regression algorithm works, what happens internally, what is the mathematical calculations that will happen internally in this linear regression. If requires, he should be able to create a new algorithm or generate a new algorithm on his own. So to understand how to create a new algorithm, first of all, you should understand how these algorithms will work internally. Without knowing these underneath concepts, you can never or ever become a data scientist. You'll be called as a data modeler. If you think you are very good in Python and you can do a number of things using Python, yes, you will be called as a data modeler. Do not imagine that you are a data scientist. And if you wanted to become a data scientist, you should know all these underneath concepts. What is happening within this algorithm? What happens when you execute a linear regression? How your data will be read? How the data will get processed? How your linear regression algorithm will produce a model out of it? All those things you should be knowing very thoroughly. If requires, you should be also capable of building a new algorithm. That is the difference.